Alrighty, well, here we are back in Skylines for another episode, and I have been working on a new part of town over here near the waterfront, so we'll take a quick look at that, and then we'll continue on to the next thing that we're going to be working on today. What I wanted to do was extend this main artery that runs through town to create a unique axis. Goes through town. It's a 6-lane road there, and then we have this traffic circle, which is kind of a unique creation. Then we have a hybrid expressway that's multiple levels as it makes its way toward the freeway. And then we have a standard interchange. And then over here, we go to an underpass, and the underpass goes beneath the railroad, just because railroads don't go over roads usually. Roads go underneath the railroad because trains can't adjust their grade very well. And then we have this part of the map where it kind of goes a little bit downhill and ends at the sea level. And I wanted to have a final leg of the freeway that'll come all the way down here and connect to a coastal waterfront expressway. And we'll have another part of town over here that's more focused on maybe leisure, coastal stuff. Probably the port will be down here, so it'll be a mixture of port development and more of the kind of development you would expect to see in a waterfront resort town. This interchange is actually directly inspired by the one in Biloxi, which is near New Orleans. I experienced it personally and thought it was kind of interesting. You have kind of a waterfront river walk, and then you have this interesting freeway that just kind of ends right there. So I thought I would create something a little bit similar, and so that is what I proceeded to do. And I do want to adjust this roadway a little bit, because while I'm talking, I was looking at it and realizing it's just a little bit misaligned, and it's bugging me. Maybe not. Maybe I have to go over here and there we go. That'll do the trick. See, it's just a little bit. Actually, it's still a little bit crooked. I don't know why the game insists on showing me the zoning tiles when I'm trying to draw roads. Like, I get that there's a usefulness there, but especially when it's nighttime, it just is not really all that helpful. But anyways, maybe we'll build a underpass here so cars can go across. Anyways, just the bones for what will be a future neighborhood. I didn't want to get too deep into it. We aren't really at that point yet. I did draw a little bit more of a random grid here for our probably industrial zones. And we also started working on dezoning some office and industrial zones, just because those demand lines have been kind of flat, and I wanted to make sure that I'm not zoning too much of one thing and not enough of another. So what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to extend this avenue across the water and build our first bridge. And the foundation of what will ultimately be our city's administrative capital. So for starters, we have a narrow road here, and I think we're going to have to expand it, unfortunately. I'm going to make it a 6-lane road. That's going to demolish some buildings, but we're not going to be too worried about it. I want to try to make the grade as level as possible. Struggled to make it perfectly straight and also perfectly level. There we go. So now we have the makings of a bridge, but I don't want it to be just a regular bridge. We want to take advantage of the various bridges that are available to us. So I guess I can't. Well, that's a bummer. I thought that I wanted to upgrade the road to a bridge, but I guess I can't. I have to draw the bridge. As a bridge. So there we have it. A 6-lane road, which is supposedly a drawbridge. Is it? Doesn't look like a drawbridge. Is each section a drawbridge? I don't know. I don't know if I like that. I think I might try the suspension bridge, just because I want something that looks iconic and captivating. No, that's not going to work at all. It's too low. All right, here we go. That, I think that will work. Cable stayed bridge with one central cable system in the middle of it. It looks iconic. It's not too ridiculously overbearing. So that actually looks good. I'll take it. So here we're gonna have to flatten out the terrain so that we don't have any problems. And it's kind of nice, you don't have to pay for terrain modification in the game. It's just completely free. In Skylines 1 you did. But here it's just as easy as grabbing the paintbrush and flattening it all out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. That should give us a real nice flat space to develop into what will be a spacious and monumental capital district. And since this is a planned part of our city, probably a newer part of our city, we're going to stick with the wide roads. And we're going to place the US Capitol asset, which has been generously made by someone recently. Which looks really nice there. You're gonna have to run a sewer line underneath the river. And a very large roundabout would make sense there. I do a little bit of grading to try to make the surrounding topography a little more gentle to work with. If we wanted to, we could say this is unrealistic, but it's actually probably reasonably plausible to say that for a project like this, you would have a certain degree of earth moving that would happen. I don't think that's too steep. I think it's going to be, should be fine. We shouldn't have any major issues with elevation. We'll do a few 4-lane roads branching off for purposes of road hierarchy. This part of town will definitely contrast the other parts of town, which don't feel like they're very deliberately planned. This really will give us the, the vibe of being a very, very rigidly planned out part of town. And if I didn't already say so, this particular part of town is not inspired so much by Washington, D.C. It's inspired more by the original plan for Chicago. Because somebody designed in 1909 a master plan for what Chicago was supposed to look like. And it was kind of like a Parisian city. It was a little bit like Washington, D.C. It was designed in the City Beautiful movement style. And it never happened. But it is something that exists. If you were to go look for it, you'll find it. Plan for Chicago, 1909. And it's a beautiful, maybe unrealistic, but beautiful interpretation of what Chicago could have been if somebody had decided they wanted to do that. Depending on how you look at it, maybe it's better that Chicago did not adopt the 1909 plan. Sometimes those really aggressive plans for what a city ought to look like wind up being damaging, because so much has to be destroyed in order to make it work. So that's the dark side of the City Beautiful movement. It was a initiative to bring urban renewal to cities and to design them in a really elegant way, in a neoclassical style. But many times, just like urban renewal movements of today, it was cool, but it wasn't necessarily good for everyone. Just like it's fun if you're if you have a new coffee shop to go to, but it's not as much fun if your house is being demolished to make room for said coffee house, or if you can't afford to live in a place where you spent most of your life living because rich people from out of town have moved in and gentrified the area, right? So, you win some, you lose some. But this particular neighborhood that we're drawing is ever so loosely inspired by the old plan for Chicago. That's kind of what gave me the idea, anyways. It always strikes me as interesting when I see something about a new administrative capital being built. Like, I think Egypt is building one, I believe. Or even cities like Dubai that do really crazy things. And I think, you know, it's almost like people in real life are playing city skylines. Only it's not in a game. It's in real life. All right, so there we have a nice, ridiculously planned out grid going in various directions. And then we're going to kind of complete that by making a deliberate point to add some weird angles in there. And some smaller blocks, because as we get out of the part of the build that is planned out, we're going to want to kind of have more of an organic looking grid. That's a kind of a crazy, weird angle. So we'll make that a one-way road. As we get further out from the center, I also want to use smaller streets. So we'll use more like alleyways and things like that, just to kind of accentuate the idea that this is you know, once you get out of the part of town that's planned, now you're getting more into like an older neighborhood that's not necessarily as planned out. Might have been there before the rest of the city was planned, because you can imagine that a lot of it would have been old neighborhoods, and then it got, demolished to make way for the Capitol building and stuff that would have gone in there. So you have weird intersections that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. We'll have a few odd streets that kind of cut into the grid, like that one could maybe. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but for some reason, maybe that's just how it worked out. You have that, because Washington DC is like that. Like, you have the parts of it that are super planned out, and it looks like somebody drew the whole city out on a piece of paper before any of it was built. But then you have angles that look kind of random too, like all at the same time. And oftentimes you have weird dead ends too, like that, like an alley that just doesn't connect to the main road because, never really worked out that way. So that looks pretty good. I think we can start developing that land. Garbage piling up. Why is the garbage truck not able to get over here? Like, is it going to come? Is that the garbage truck right there? It is. Look at that. The garbage truck did make it here. Good stuff. I was worried. So that looks pretty cool. Capitol building. Got an amazing view of it as you make your way over the bridge from downtown. we still have not a lot of demand for industry and office space. We do have a lot of demand for residential zones, so we will start zoning in residential. And a little bit of mixed residential and commercial, because we want to have some commerce going on the north side of the river. Now, I also subscribed to a grocery store asset that's a custom asset. So I think I want to see if I can find that. And I don't know if it's in the landmark buildings or... but gotta look around for it. I assume the grocery store should be a commercial landmark building. Well, maybe that's not meant to be today. I'll have to look for it more another time. But eventually, I think we'll put the grocery store over here to kind of anchor the beginning of development in the entertainment district. So we kind of have three distinct parts of town: an administrative area, central business district, the industry and the railroad area, and then the entertainment and resort town area. will kind of tell an interesting story when all is said and done. So let's see, what do we have here? Don't know if I like how it looks, because you got these little buildings look great up against the street, but then you have that big open space with nothing. And so we're gonna have to do something to fill up that space. But it doesn't have to be perfect right away, so not gonna worry too much. I just wish that the game was a little bit smarter when it comes to how it generates zoning. It just doesn't feel very intuitive sometimes. On this side of the river, I also want to make sure we're sensitive about building heights, because having that Capitol dome there, we don't want a lot of other buildings that are superimposing that detract from it. Our people are pretty happy, all things considered. Look at all that traffic. I'm going to have to do something about the traffic, because as people move into town, the only way they have to get where they need to go is over that one bridge. And that's going to be a problem. So looks like the next thing we're going to need to do is probably to invest in some kind of mass transit services. Now we could do an overground subway station. And I'm not really sure what is the difference between a tram station and an overground subway. We could put a subway there. We could put it, actually, well, I was gonna say it could go there, but I don't like the way it blocks the view, so maybe not. Maybe we'll put the subway subway station right there. It's pretty close, but it's not in front of the Capitol building. We'll do 2 platforms because we probably are going to want to expand this eventually. And we'll build a truss arch bridge, probably. Yeah, I think so. We'll do the truss arch bridge because it'll look nice. But before we do that, we're going to have to figure out how it's going to integrate with the existing subway line. And we have a line running along the riverbank. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to split off of that. And then we're going to take it above ground. Right about there. Which is kind of creative and interesting. I'm going to delete a few roads here so that we can give that track a gentle grade. And we're going to connect this second track more or less to nothing. Eventually we will use it, but not yet. And something was really wrong there. That's not the type of design we want to see. There we go. That's better. So we have a nice modern subway extension. That's not going to work. But what I want to do is I wanted to make that track connect going in both directions. But I don't know that I'm going to really have room to do that here. Maybe. So I guess to do what I want to do, I'm going to have to destroy part of that pedestrian quay, and maybe we can rework it and it'll be fine. So let's just, we'll go with it. See how it turns out. All right, so we were able to make the connection. Probably a little bit steep, but it's not too crazy. Like I can live with that. Now we just have to figure out how to fix the pedestrian path. It's probably not too hard. Just a little bit of finagling. All right, that works. Pretty tight to fit it in, but we did. So now we're going to add a subway line, which connects to this station, and services the existing line that I already made. But going in the opposite direction. And we're going to name our subway routes just so that we can remember which ones they are. And unpause the game. There we have a elevated train line going across this lovely bridge, and we have our incredible 6-lane road that is all jammed up with traffic. We have people starting to come over here and park so that they can ride the L train. It'd probably be in our interests to build some parking garages. I think an underground parking garage is probably a good idea here. Lots of capacity. It doesn't take up a huge amount of space. And there we have a nice awkward pedestrian overpass. It reminds me of a pedestrian overpass that was really controversial. People were getting angry about it because it was at some state capitol campus. But people felt like it was not really respectful of the historic architecture, and it was not really necessary. And it costs a lot of money. So that's kind of the vibe I get off of this overpass. I really designed it just because I wanted people to be able to easily park and then go across the street. But I think it's, you know, kind of a lot of walking, probably. So what we're going to do in this case is we're just going to add some extra crosswalks there. And I think we're going to add another parking garage. And some bike parking. We have no shortage of bike parking, no shortage of vehicle parking. What we can actually do to make this even better is just convert that entire road into a pedestrian street and turn around that car parking garage so it's facing the adjacent street behind it. And since we made that a pedestrian street, we don't need the kind of ridiculous overpass at all. Probably it's time for us to add a hospital because, well, maybe not a big hospital, but some kind of a medical center to service this side of the river. I think that hospital looks kind of nice. It could also be what was going on with that. It was for some reason it was saying there was no pedestrian access. Yeah, see? It wants to... Why does it say there's no pedestrian access? Well, not super sure. But that's all right. We will go ahead and add a... We'll add a cemetery. And I actually think what we're going to do is we're going to delete that street right there. Because the cemetery included in the original base game is enormous. And it doesn't really fit in very well in a lot of places just because it kind of winds up being so big it just kind of like dwarfs everything around it. But in this particular case, I think it fits in very well. Maybe even as a... Could be a military cemetery. It could be... any number of different sorts of historic cemeteries. How about garbage collection? Seems that there's a lot of garbage produced at the U.S. Capitol building here. I don't know if I really want to put a recycling center over here, but I think I'm going to kind of have to, because the city is just going to be so big. It's not going to work if I don't have some garbage collection resources that are not over here. But I also have this toxic plume of pollution, and I kind of want to keep that over there, so we'll keep an eye on it. At some point I might wind up doing an industrial area further downwind. That way we're not polluting our capital administrative district. We have a bunch of people here parking on the street. I don't love that, so we are going to take away the parking. Absolutely no parking on any of this main loop. It should be nice, decorative kind of a part of town. You don't come in and see people parking their cars all over the place. Those are little trees. Eventually they will grow into big trees. It's actually nice on the 6-lane road that's divided. We can also plant trees in the middle. So that's going to grow to be a really nice, pretty tree-lined boulevard. We'll do the same thing over here. We still have a lot of room for improvement. We can do a lot more than what we have done, but I think we've got a good starting point for this new neighborhood. And definitely a lot more of a vision for what the city has potential to become. And that's something that's been on my mind as I've worked on expansion lately. I know we were talking about getting the downtown area right, but as far as continuing to grow into the future, the question of, what are the future projects going to look like to make this city unique? Now I think we can kind of see what that long-term growth plan looks like. And it'll be a pretty cool city to have something on both sides of the river that is kind of different, that anchors the neighborhood, and then to have that that coastal part of the city that is separated from everything else by the railroad lines and the industrial area. So we really feel like we have kind of multiple cities that are all merging together to create a metro of sorts. Anyways, we'll leave it there. Been a pretty good time today, I would say. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.